Hey everybody, this is Mrs. Gelletley and I'm here to talk to you about thermal energy, which is going to be our focus in the STEAM lab. Thermal energy, otherwise known as heat energy, is the energy an object has because of the movement of its molecules. In other words, it's an object's energy that is generated and measured by heat. So one great thing about thermal energy is there's such thing called heat transfer. And heat transfer is when the heat from one object can be given to another object. So a great example of this is the heat energy that we get on Earth comes from the sun. So the heat from the sun hits the Earth, and that is what raises the heat on Earth's surface. So let's take a look at how this happens. Everything on Earth is made up of molecules, and molecules are so super tiny that you would need a very powerful microscope to see them. Molecules are always moving. So things that are solids, like your desk, has molecules. Liquids, like water and soda, have molecules. And gas, like oxygen you breathe, has molecules. And what happens with the molecules when they are heated, they start to get excited and they move faster and faster. So no matter what, these molecules that make up everything are always moving. So when molecules get heated, they move more and more. When molecules get excited, they touch other molecules, heating them up and getting them excited as well. This sharing of heat spreads until all the molecules on that object are the same temperature, and that is when they begin to settle down. So, for example, if I were to take a piece of toast that I had put in the toaster and put butter on it, the molecules on the biscuit would warm and vibrate, would then transfer to the butter, and once the butter is on that toast, the molecules in the biscuit begin to heat and excite the molecules of the butter, and the butter starts to melt. Heat energy is being transferred from the toast to the butter. So there are three ways that heat transfer can happen. So we're going to talk about each different type. The first one is called conduction. So conduction transfers heat within a body or between two bodies that are touching. So the two objects physically have to be touching each other. So a great example of this would be if you had a pot on the stove that you had on high heat. When you went to touch that, the heat would be transferred from the pot to your hand because it would have been heated up from the stove. The second type of energy transfer is convection. So convection happens when the gas or a liquid is warming up and the warmer parts move up and the cooler parts move down in a cycle. So you can see on this picture, as the water is heated up towards the bottom, it makes it rise, and the cooler water on top is then transferred down, and it keeps going into the cycle until all of the water is heated to the same temperature. And the third type of energy transfer is thermal radiation. So thermal radiation is when the source of the heat and the body that is heated are not touching, and no matter needs to be moved between them. So a great example of this is the sun to the earth. The sun and the earth are not physically touching, but the heat radiation from the sun is heating up the earth. Another example would be is if you went camping and you had a fire, the thermal energy radiates through the air from the fire into your hands, thus heating up your hands. Your hands aren't physically touching the fire, so that wouldn't be a conduction heat transfer. This is a thermal radiation. So again, let's talk about this one more time. This is a nice picture that kind of explains all three types of heat transfers. So there's conduction. So conduction is when the two bodies or the two objects are physically touching and the heat is transferred from the pot to the hand. Convection is when the particles are heated, they rise, and the cooler particles go down to the bottom of the pot. And then radiation is the heat that is coming off the stove you can feel on your hand. You're not physically touching the stove, you're just feeling the heat come off of it. So now you guys are going to look through the rest of the slideshow. watch a second video, and then you need to take the quiz that goes along with this information. Thanks, and I'll see you this week in the STEAM lab.